Thank you for being here, Geeta. And thank you for listening to us. You're listening to Empowered Women series. This is where we talk to inspiring women like Geeta Iyer so that aspiring women leaders like you can take inspiration from her experiences, stories, and this candid conversation. There are so many things to say about Geeta and her successful finance career. Just to mention one or two things is she is a founder of Boston Common Asset Management, and she was only a second Indian woman in Harvard Business School. And rest of the list, you can Google it and find it somewhere else. But I have always been extremely impressed with who Geeta is and extremely inspired by her. And today we are going to talk about a very special award that Geeta's nonprofit is going to introduce. Are you ready, Geeta?
I am. Thank you. This is a topic very dear to my heart, so I'm very happy to talk to you about this.
So first thing first, what is an upstander? I have heard of bystander. What's this upstander?
We are in the middle of a moment of reckoning, and we see that injustices of all kinds are happening all around us, and we have been much more aware and sensitized to it. But this isn't when it started, right? So gender-based violence, which is our focus, or indeed racial discrimination, injustice, and violence have persisted for a long time. One reason why more is not done is that we remain bystanders. So the fact that George Floyd was killed on national television made all of us bystanders and witnesses at the same time. But this, again, is not the first time that we've witnessed things like this. What we end up sometimes doing is saying that we may think that the system is how it is, and too bad, I'm glad I'm not that person. It's not my problem to get in the middle of, or I would love to help, but I don't really have the resources or reach or the time right now to do anything about it. So we remain bystanders. We are not unaware. We may have even seen it, but we don't do anything about it. In contrast, there are heroes, people who have moved from that bystander role to what we call an upstander role, where they actually do something and they act with impact. I mean, positive or negative. They may achieve change or they may pay a price. They may have consequences to themselves, or indeed things may improve, but the action was not for their own benefit. They may be, most often we think of them as people who are not affected by this. They were not either the perpetrator or the victim of any of these. And so they've acted to make change happen. And in this form of positive allyship, of active allyship, is where we see the role of an upstander.
Do you know many upstanders? Have you heard of them? Because it just feels like most of us land up being bystanders more often than not.
It's surprising when we went down this path. Every now and then you see it in the paper or written about. We don't always connect those dots. And part of my effort was to say that they actually are all around us. Ordinary, everyday people in different walks of life, doing different jobs. Not really someone who put on their Superman cloak and set out in the morning to cape and set out in the morning to do something. They're just ordinary people. But when they see something, they may act immediately, they may act within a short period of time, but they have seen the consequence of the bad act and also seen the positive consequence of changing it, or at least stopping the bad act and highlighting it, or doing something about it. When we set out to look for this, we were surprised by how many fields of activity there were people, different professions, disciplines, lines of work, where there had been people who stepped up in their own different ways. In fact, the choice was pretty hard. There was a lot of debate and discussion about it when we set out to create this award in the category.
And why is Dawn giving this award?
Dawn is an NGO, and our work is focused on gender-based violence and preventing gender-based violence, helping those who have been subjected to it, but also actively creating positive allies who may be men and boys, verticals in society, etc., engaging with them to prevent, mitigate, and address this challenge. Because like so many instances of violence and injustice, those on whom this burden falls of suffering these types of injustices or violence should not also bear the burden of changing how things are, because their organizing, their empowerment is important. It's definitely one of the verticals, but that alone is not sufficient. You need the broader society, those who are on the side of power in this instance, to change as well. And so our belief is that we would be working to connect, empower, strengthen, share storytelling, create a race to the top, create a widespread acceptance and recognition that every one of us has the role of being vigilant, involved, upstanders in our own right. So we've done some trainings to try to help young people, either college age or which we feel is a very important age group. We would ideally like to expand to go to other age groups or verticals in society. We've tried to engage with social organizations and civic society organizations. But the goal everywhere is to educate on this issue and to make this not something where you avert your gaze, but actually look at and think about what could be different and how it could be made different by us. I think it's inside everyone. My biggest source for hope, and again, bringing it back to the US in today's time, is you can see the composition of the rallies of people standing up to say this is not acceptable in the case of injustice on the basis of race and violence on the basis of race. And we have allies from every walk of life whose personal experience may not include, who have been made aware and who are energized and think that we can do something. So in that way, there's a latent desire, and we can organize and catalyze some of that and reward some of that. I could go on and on, but I feel like some of this activism is in the streets for everyone to see. But I think when we are, in whatever big or small way, confronted with some of these in our own lines of work or in our own daily tasks, is there a way for us to be more of an ally, more of an active ally? What might those tools be? What lessons can be learned? We would love to catalog and talk more about this.
Yes, yeah. And activism happens everywhere. Activism is not just something that happens on the streets. It happens at home. It happens in offices, organizations, online, and then also on streets.
Yes, exactly. People often engage in many parts of their lives. They might write checkbook support. They might participate in these types of rallies. We want to empower and embolden more action personally on almost all dimensions, if we can.
We are talking about an upstandard for gender-based equality, for gender-based violence, the issues which are related to gender, because that is Dawn's work. Dawn is direct action for women now, and it is built around gender-based issues. I wanted to just create our focus one more time. How do you think just giving this one award is going to make a difference?
It's a start. I agree that we're not fully there, but our goal is to celebrate those who have stepped up, tell their story, to educate and sensitize and make aware everyone else, to embolden their willingness to act and to create more cases about this, stories about this. So eventually, we believe that this type of action by bystanders is better for all, because it raises the playing field and allows a better world. In the immediate sense, it may look like there's no reward to the upstander, right? I mean, they did it. It doesn't change their life. It might even put them at some risk, which it often does, because they could be criticized, teased or harassed, sometimes personally attacked in certain parts of the world, or in many circumstances, it could mean that they are excluded in some ways. They are they can come to harm because they gain a reputation for being, not going along in order to get along, and instead speaking up and doing something. So from our point of view, the highlighting of people, everyday ordinary people, not necessarily unusual people who have stepped away, who've made this their life's work, but ordinary people pursuing their own professions. And in places where they see this, we want to empower them to stand up. We want to spark a discussion on being against gender-based injustice, gender-based inequality, and gender-based violence.
Yeah, and I also see this as normalizing standing up against something even when it's not your problem.
Yeah, too often we normalize the opposite. And I think that's the real trouble, why we haven't done this, right? We've normalized looking the other way or condoning, by not acting, and everyone being at peace, thinking I wasn't one of the perpetrators. And we're saying there's something more you can do, and that you can be actively against this type of injustice.
In our previous discussion, we talked about starting this award from finance industry. And that is my question, which is, why finance industry? What's so special about it?
We didn't set out to start here, but it happens to be an industry also that I know very well. In our survey, we found many possible awardees. We identified some really important work in this space. This is a space, finance, which, first of all, is a huge sector. It's ubiquitous all around us. Women have been in finance for a very long time, right? Everyone knows somebody works at a bank or does something that is connected with finance. Yet, when you go to the upper echelons, when you go to particularly investment management, which is my field, there is a very, very low proportion of women in actual decision-making roles, investment lead roles, mutual fund manager roles, or portfolio management roles. There is a lot of presence of women in supporting activities. It turns out to be one of those places where women can advance, but in the decision-making, in the uppermost echelons of finance, we don't have enough sensitivity, sensitization, and ironically and sadly, the proportion of women in these roles has gone down in the last 20 years instead of going up. While the field has grown, the proportion has declined. And so it's in part also reflective of the type of energy, the type of culture that the industry perpetuates. In my experience, that is unnecessary. There is a huge amount of talent being wasted. Women are actually very good risk managers. They are able to process many types of information and balance many factors and make decisions. So portfolio management is exactly that. You're not required to drive a huge truck or sleep in dangerous places at night. I mean, this is not heavy lifting. It is, there is nothing about this job that disqualifies women. In fact, most of the indications are that on performance, the women actually may do better than men. Yet, so I want to dispel the meritocracy argument that they are deservedly not there at the table argument, because I don't see any evidence for it. And in fact, studies have shown that it is actually implicit bias and systemic barriers that have kept women from rising to this top. But that aside, so I know that this field could use a lot of improvement, but separate from that, our choice of awardee had something to do with a culture that enables and condones open discussions that are disparaging. We wanted to ensure that the part of the reason why women may not be so present in this is that it is not a comfortable environment. So even if companies wanted to do the right thing and hire more women, they need to figure out how to allow them to remain and prosper and thrive. And in semi-public places, which is, we can't stop how people think, but we can address how they behave or what they say and what is okay. We wanted to speak up on that.
Yeah. And it is a beginning. When you try to change how people behave, is a beginning to change how people think. Unless you change your behavior, you can't change your thinking. And you mentioned, so two parts you mentioned, which is important. One is because finance industry has currently doesn't have environment that would help women's progress. The number of women in finance industry are less. That's why finance industry. The second one, you said that the awardee that you thought of stood up against something in finance industry. And third one, you had mentioned to me in some other conversation, which was the impact that finance industry has on other industries and could be a leading industry.
That's exactly right. For a very long time, people have not appreciated enough the extent to which finance actually permeates and reaches out and connects in their value chain to almost every industry or indeed every pursuit out there. So in addressing this question, we were looking at the leverage, the huge leverage that finance has, because it's both in its size and ubiquity, but also in the consequences of its decision making. It is a really big lever. We've, in my work, my day job, we've engaged banks on climate change, on, in racial and gender inequality. And I feel that there is so much power to do good in addition to not causing harm. So not perpetuating these views, but also acting to be part of the solution, most definitely.
Being important comes with the responsibility of being responsible.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So I was also thinking about what do you want? This is my second last question. What do you want people to do when they witness this award, when they hear about Upstandard Award? People, men, women, in between, people of any gender. What do you want them to do?
I would like them to take notice, understand, and appreciate, obviously, what our awardee took on as a little bit of a risk, career risk or reputational risk, or indeed that you do something and nothing results, no impact results. So all of those would have been possible outcomes when the awardee stood up to do what they did as an ally. I also want people to reflect a little on situations where things may be brushed off as small harms and therefore not worth acting upon. So many of us may not find ourselves in a place where a heinous act is being perpetuated. And indeed, intervening there may be of a very different form of, require a very different form of training or thought in terms of how to. But in very ordinary day-to-day circumstances, we may. And so what could we learn about methods to use, tactics to use? When is the right time to intervene? How can we do things better? And then finally, I think to recognize that the rights of all are maintained by the support of all. And that it isn't just about saying that we're not just saying that the bottom depends on us to protect them, or the worst affected depend on us to protect them. What we are saying is that the culture and the language of everything, which by the way is true, we're saying that the bystanders are the assurance. We as civil society create a ring around behaviors. We are the guarantors of certain civic, certain modes of functioning. So we not only bear the collective responsibility, but we also have the opportunity to be vigilant and active in ensuring better conduct.
There are three things, which is you want people, first of all, you want people to take notice. Second of all, you want people to be inspired to do something like this. And third, you're not just saying that, be inspired emotionally or passionately. You're also giving them a framework to manage their risk, because there is a risk in being upstander, and you are helping them with that risk management. I love the holistic nature of and 360-degree impact, and how this award has been designed and planned. It's amazing. And thank you for doing something like that. And I know that a lot of work that you do is related to gender equality. There is a lot of work that you do through men. men, younger men, the youth. And MAWA, especially MAWA's work, or Raising Men, which is you work with men between age of 14 to 18 and teach them how they should behave with women and what is their responsibility towards gender equality. And this happens in India. This model that you're using is in India. If you were to design a curriculum for business school, because I'm trying to create a link between finance industry and Dawn's existing work. What changes would you make to the curriculum in business school?
I view it in the same lens as anti-bias training or anti-gender bias training. I also, so that people are sensitized and given the tools and get to study and think about case studies and understand why. There is a huge amount of information on how hard it is for women entrepreneurs to get financing, for example. And a lot of people in the business school class are likely to be in positions that determine whether or not they get funded. If we could have that level of understanding, appreciation for this huge opportunity that exists of people who create jobs, who are actually sustainers of the family, are not asking for any special or separate treatment. We have to stop seeing it like that. We are actually conditioned and taught to think of it as risk, and instead to think of it as opportunity, and to think about how to enable that opportunity to find fruition. So that's one aspect. I feel that in almost all the cases and the composition of the dominant model of behavior is not holistic, is not feminine, and is not inclusive. And because of that, business school students go out and perpetuate, knowingly or unknowingly, unthinkingly prolonging what has always been. So I think that financial orthodoxy has been inculcated in teaching, and they come out as experts, and their expertise is in how to perpetuate the orthodoxy. I would love for the center of the plate, for finance to be taught that way, not sustainable finance or inclusive finance or some other qualifying adjective and before it that then people take as an elective, or to unlearn what they've already learned. But to teach it right the first time would be very, very important. This is globally the most harm on almost all the major negative trends, climate change, gender issues, pandemic, you name it, are borne by women at the bottom, and it is very important to connect the dots that therefore they need to be at the center of the solution as well. One of the top 5 things, that the top 5 list of things you can do on climate includes education of women, empowerment of women. And they are not just part of the problem, they are part of the solution. We not only need to identify it, whether you come to it for financial reasons or you come to it for planetary conditions, quality of life reasons, there is absolutely no need for it to be an afterthought. The women are, in many countries, the largest minority. It takes a lot of work to do that, but in the US and developed countries, they are the majority, and plurality. And it just seems silly that this should not be at the center of the plate.
It's the basic principle of design thinking, which is those who face the problem are the ones with key insights to solving that problem. And if you don't take them along, you will never be able to solve the problem. Because, having gone to business school and having experienced these things in how, words like feminism, gender equality are ignored and actually laughed at, I 100% get your point and agree with it. And I hope someone from a business school is listening to this, and they don't make it as an elective, as, a gender equal finance or something like that. But this is finance. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. Because I feel like we have mismanaged a lot of things. And if we are willing to see that, then we need to teach better ways to do things. Part of the problem lies in the belief that we haven't mismanaged.
Every change has barriers. So it's not really, every change has a barrier, and not everyone is, obviously in perfect world, everyone would be adaptable to positive changes, but that's not the world we live in.
I want to say that it is also the case that if you manage it right, if you do it right, there is great reward. It isn't, I love to identify not the risks of ignoring or mismanaging gender issues, but I want to point out and highlight the flip of it, that if you do it right, there is huge reward. And we've seen that in the data is starting to come in. And I would love for the academic data to be, shared widely and taught.
Yeah. And anyone who wants to manage those risks and rip those rewards, we are here to help them. Geeta is here to help them. Dawn is here to help them. And is there anything else you want to share about the award, or anything that we did not talk about?
I would love for people to view the award as relevant to whatever walk of life you're in, not just a finance-related award. I would also like it to be seen as something for men and women alike, because as I point out repeatedly, eventually the playing field is raised. It's not a zero-sum relationship. Eventually the pie becomes bigger and the whole playing field is raised when we are more proactive on these issues, and that it is for that future that we are building, no matter which field we are in, and that's the journey we're on.
Yep. It's whether it's race or gender, equality is just that. It's equality. Equality for one person does not mean inequality for someone else. And
exactly.
In your words, it's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for this, Geeta. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and cannot wait to see who is the first awardee of Upstander Award. And I am excited to be present at the event. Whenever it is, wherever it is, I will be there.
Thank you so much.